So my name is Bryan, and I am glad to be with you tonight for our second session in our CI Masterclass, a 4-session workshop. So we had one on February 24th, a month ago. If you are not at that or haven't seen it yet, that video is available. You can watch later. Don't watch it right now. Stay with us right now, but you can watch that one later. The first session was an introduction to CI, comprehensible input, and what it is, and some pillars. And we're actually going to go back to a few of those today, but we're really going to focus on exposure or target language use, using our target language as much as possible in our classes. So that's today, that's session 2. Very quickly, next month, April 28th, will be our 3rd session, and we'll focus a lot on reading, a new voice. We're going to talk today a lot about our voices and the way we speak, and a little bit about reading and the target language. Next week, we'll talk a lot about reading. And then the 4th session, which will be May 26th, for a lot of us, nearly the end of our school year, we will talk about other forms of input beyond reading, storytelling, music, videos, games, lots of other ways that we can provide input for our students. So that will be a lot of fun as well. So don't end your school year too quickly. Come join us for those last 2. But today we are talking about maximizing target language use. This is my website here, which is simply bryankandel.com. You can contact me through that website. I love to be able to help. As some of you know, I interacted with a few of you after the last session and did pretty well at times. And then sometimes I get busy and it may take me a few days to get back. And I think I still owe some emails to a couple of people. So I'm working on that as well. But I love to be able to help when I can. That's my website. It has some books and things as well, which we'll see later on. And yeah. So this is what we're doing today. We're talking about target language use. Our voice, the teacher's voice, is a source of much of the input that students hear in a world language classroom. We talk a lot. We want to talk in our target language. We want our students to get input from hearing us. However, maintaining that use of our target language while speaking comprehensibly can be a challenge. And I'm sure a lot of us know that. Trying to stay in that target language and have students understand everything we say is not easy. Often a shift in classroom procedures and practices is necessary to make increased exposure to target language work successfully. We're going to get into that. Sometimes it means we can't just keep doing what we were doing and try to do it in our language. We have to change a little bit of what we're doing. So that's what we'll get in today. We'll learn strategies and techniques for reaching that goal of 90%. ACTFL has that goal set that we should use our target language 90% of the time. We're going to try to figure out how we can do that most effectively and provide maximum amounts of input during each class period. There's some artwork in this presentation. I did a similar presentation a few weeks ago on target language use, and I needed some images that were not copyrighted. So I asked my daughter to make some pictures for me. She's 11. She likes drawing on her little iPad. So I said, and this was like the day of that presentation. I said, Lila's her name. I said, can you make me some pictures? She said, yeah, what? I said, well, how about a teacher teaching a class? So she gave me this image. And I said, oh, that looks awesome, except that's math and I teach Spanish. So she ran back up to her bedroom. A few minutes later, she sent me this. So this is what she thinks I do all day. And it's really pretty accurate. That's a lot of what we do every day. So a lot of the pictures you'll see in this presentation are from my daughter, Lila. I'm hoping to someday collaborate with her on some works and have her do some illustration for some materials. Last time in February, we talked about 12 pillars of comprehensible input. And tonight, again, this workshop is going to be really aimed at those who are new to comprehensible input. If you've been using CAI for a long time, there's plenty here for you. If you're still not even considered, you wouldn't consider yourself new, you're like just investigating, there's plenty here for you as well. But this is really aimed at those who are looking for an introduction to CI. And that's what we did a lot of last time, was we looked at 12 pillars of comprehensible input. I want to look at them very quickly here, just to review, and we're also going to dig into some of them more tonight. We talked about a reduction in quantity. We just have to reduce the amount of language we try to cover in a class. Focus on high frequency language. If we're going to reduce, we have to make sure we're focusing on the words and phrases that are most useful and most frequently used. An unwavering commitment to target language use. That's what we're really going to dig into tonight. And really, we're going to dig into these 3 and see how they're connected. Emphasis on listening and reading, an emphasis on language use and not just recognition. We want students, we're providing a lot of input in our target language because we want our students to use it themselves. A reduction in student work, an emphasis on personalization. When we use our target language, we want to talk about our students, the things that interest them and the activities that they do. A constant search for compelling materials, a variety of activities with the same purpose. We'll actually get into this a lot tonight too, because when we speak to our students, we're not going to do the same thing all the time. We're going to talk to them in different activities. An awareness of processing abilities. When we speak our target language, how quickly and how well are our students comprehending? Emphasis on experience, and an emphasis on proficiency-based assessments. So that was very quickly what we did last month. Tonight, I want to break this down into 3 parts when it comes to using our target language. First off is a commitment to target language use. And I think this is super important because if we don't start with this commitment to it, then our use of the target language could break down and fall apart because it's not easy. It's not easy to use our language all the time. And so we have to be committed to it first before we get into how we do it. We're going to look at some keys to success, generally some keys to success and how we do it well. And then lastly, some specific activities to increase target language use. If you want to tomorrow or Monday, if you want to do some things like you just say, I want to spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 10 minutes where my only goal is I'm going to use French or Spanish or German or Italian or whatever. I want to use my language. I'm going to give you some activities that make it easier to do that. And then they are activities that work really well throughout the course of your year. So let's start with a commitment to target language use. For me, and we talked about this a little bit last time, my first goal number 1 is using the target language. I am a Spanish teacher. I teach Spanish 3 and 4 and AP Spanish 5. And don't worry, we're going to talk about lower levels, but I teach those levels. And the first thing, my goal every year and every week and every day is to use Spanish as much as possible because I believe in the power. And so this commitment is based on belief. And we talked about this a lot last time too. Our first goal is not knowledge. Knowledge is part of it, but what our students can understand and the amount of knowledge they have isn't the first most important goal. It's skills. So if I believe that skills are most important, and I believe that skills are a result of input, then I'm going to make target language use my first goal. So it is my first goal. And I don't know if we mentioned this last time, but what happens a lot of times with teachers is they get to a point in their classroom where there's a conflict, where I can't teach this. I can't do something really complicated in my target language, so I do it in English. For me, when I get to that conflict, if I can't do it in Spanish, I don't do it. It's not worth breaking this goal. It's not worth breaking the culture in our classroom of using Spanish all the time. So if I can't do it in Spanish, then it's really not worth doing. And then we have to constantly work to improve our ability to speak comprehensively in the target language. There are 2 skills when it comes to speaking our languages for teachers. One is to speak our language well. And for those of us who are not heritage native speakers who grew up speaking that language as our first language, that takes work. We need to have access to input. We need to work on our abilities to speak the language. For those who do speak it as their first language, you're already ahead of the game there. That's check 1. You can speak the language very well. However, the second key skill is to speak it comprehensibly. And that's a challenge for all of us, regardless of first or second and third language. Speak in a way that our students understand. And that takes practice and that takes work. So we have to constantly work to improve our ability to speak in a way that students understand. It's not natural. It's not easy. The good news is you get better at it as you go. If you are a young or new teacher, you probably have had the experience of getting in front of your class, speaking your target language, and being frustrated because they don't understand you. And that's natural and that's okay. The more you do it, the more you're with your students, the more you're in front of your students, the more you communicate with them, the more you start to hear with their ears and see with their eyes. And then you get better and better and better at speaking in a way they understand. You know what they're not understanding or what they're not going to understand and what you need to define or draw or use gestures. You know when you're going too fast and when you need to slow down. And so give yourself a little grace. It's okay. It's not natural. It's not easy. You get better at it with it every year. Target language use is part of classroom culture. Classroom culture is really important. To illustrate this, I've had a couple interactions recently, really a few in the last like month or so, where I've run into students outside of class at Chipotle, at another restaurant, somewhere, a few different restaurants and places. You know how fun it is to run into students outside of school, right? And I was with my family and I talked to them in English and they were just weirded out by it. They're like, don't talk to me in English. That's not right. Because they were so used to Spanish that English felt weird. They need to get to the point where they expect to hear their target language. And with every class I've ever taught, there may be some intimidation at the beginning, like the first day, but they eventually get comfortable with it and they eventually want it. They don't want you to speak English. They want you to speak your target language because they start to see how that helps them grow. And that's why they take the language. They want to understand it. They want to use it. They want you to speak in your target language. You just have to do it in a way that they can understand it. The teacher is in charge of how much target language is used. You dictate how much you use your target language. Students might push back because the reason I put this is I've had teachers that say, oh, my students won't let me do that. They won't let me use the target language the whole time. Forgive me, but that's not true. Your students are not in charge of how much target language you use. You are. You are the one that dictates how much Spanish or French or German you speak in your classroom. Now, it's not easy. Again, you have to prove to them they can understand. You have to do some things we're going to go over tonight. But you are, don't forget, you are in charge of the language you speak. And then I think I talked about this last time. In my class, really, students know that I can speak English. Almost all of my students speak English. It would be easier for us to communicate in English, but that's not our goal and nobody would grow. So we're basically playing this game all the time where we're pretending like we don't know English and we're using Spanish. The game doesn't mean we're always being silly. We do serious things, but we're always from day one, from minute one, we're living in this world where we pretend like we don't know English because we're speaking Spanish. I will get in a little bit here. I'll get into the expectations for students versus teachers and use of language. The last part of commitment to target language use is this: shoot for the moon. Okay, we talked about that percentage. We talked about 90% is the goal from Actful, which is a great goal. I actually don't like to think in terms of percentages. What some teachers do is they divide their class and they say, I'm going to speak for 10 minutes in English, 30 minutes in Spanish, 15 minutes back in English, or 20 in French and 20 in English or whatever. And they try to divide class up and they may even look at percentages and say, I'm going to speak this percentage. No, what works best is that you say, this is a Spanish class. I'm going to speak Spanish this class. You shoot for the moon. You shoot for 100%. And then when English happens, it's okay. Start in the target language and allow necessary disruptions, not vice versa. Don't start in English and then say, okay, now we're going to shoot. Now we're going to switch. We're going to shift to doing all target language. No, shoot for your target language 100% of the time. And really, honestly, the percentages don't matter because, you know, it might be 90% one day. It might be 70%. If it's new for you, maybe 50% is great. If you're teaching younger students, 60%, 50%, it doesn't matter. I think it's more important to have this mindset that this is a class where we speak this target language. I'm going to shoot for 100%, but sometimes English is going to happen. Sometimes we translate things. Sometimes we need to establish meaning with some English. You know, sometimes it happens. It's okay, but shoot for the moon, shoot for 100% and allow disruptions to happen, and then practice and grow. And again, it's not easy. It's not natural. If you get to the end of a day or you get to the end of a class and you just feel frustrated because it didn't go well, it's okay. Allow yourself some grace. The great thing about teaching is we get to do it again the next day. We get to do it again the next year. You know, we're getting to the end of this year. This might be something that you really want to focus on over the summer and start next year with, you know, this being one of your main goals is that I'm going to increase my use of Spanish or French or target language in the classroom. Practice it, grow. If it's slow growth, that's okay. Okay, some keys to success. These are some general keys to success for using our target language in class. And I mentioned this before. If you are frustrated by your current use of the language, you probably need to change some of what you do in class, especially if you're teaching in a very traditional way. with a traditional textbook that focuses on long vocabulary lists, long grammar explanations, a lot of notes, a lot of study. It's very difficult to continue to do that and increase your target language because that's complex. It's complicated. We need to reduce what we're doing, simplify, and then that makes target language use easier. This is one of the pillars we talked about last time, a reduction in quantity. We believe in internalization. We're based on repetition. We don't have a lot of time, so we have to simplify. We just have to simplify what we do. That works for CI, and it works for target language use as well. I'm going to jump actually to number 3 on those pillars. I know that's out of order, but number 3 was an unwavering commitment to target language use. So we don't have a lot of time. We have to maximize it. We want to provide as much input as possible. We want to create that culture. And so that reduction of quantity and target language use, they have to go together. Because if I'm trying to use my target language as much as possible, I just have to reduce it. It's really difficult to try to keep doing the same thing. Likewise, if I'm going to reduce the quantity of what I'm teaching, then I really need to use the target language, because what happens there, and I think I mentioned this in February, some teachers get on board with this idea of cutting back. Let's focus on some high frequency vocabulary, some high frequency language. Let's cut way back on the amount. And then they continue to speak English. And now we're losing out on both potentials for growth. We're not growing our knowledge as much, and we're not growing our input because we're not hearing enough of that target language. The other thing we said last time was, jumping into the middle here, number 2, a focus on high frequency language. If we're going to reduce, we have to think about what is most powerful. What words and phrases can my students communicate with, or do they need to communicate? We talked about these Super 7. You can do a lot with these verbs. Once, is, likes, goes, has. There's so much you can talk about with just those verbs, especially if you are using a language with cognates or proper nouns that fit. We talked about these common actions last time, and if you have, or when you have this presentation, you can open up this link. I always start with these actions that we can do some gestures for: speak, eat, run, talk, walk, see, look for, drive. Those are very high frequency. They're easily acted out. They're easily internalized. If we start with these Super 7 verbs and those actions, there's a whole lot of things we can talk about. In fact, I'll show you at the end tonight an example of how far you can get with just that in a few hours with your kids. And so if we focus on that high frequency language, we can really use our target language a lot because there's so much we can say. I think I gave this example last time, but again, to emphasize it, if we spend a lot of time in class talking about a list of all the places around town, which could be even longer than this, the bank, the supermarket, the library, the gas station, the school, we spend a lot of time learning what those things are. What can we do? We can make a list of all those places. Well, it's hard to use your target language when all you have is a list of places. On the other hand, if we spend that same amount of time internalizing these phrases, has, once, goes, says, now there's so much we could tell an enormous story. We can talk about personalized things: who has a cat, who has a dog, who has a car, who wants a dog, who wants a cat, who goes to Walmart, who goes to Giant Eagle. There's so much we can talk about, and now it makes it easier to use our target language. It all comes back to reducing the amount of information, increasing repetition, and natural use. The last key to using our target language successfully is being in manageable situations for us as teachers and for students. Again, don't put yourself in a very complex situation when you're trying to speak to your students. Keep it simple. Don't put your students in very complex, complicated situations. When you're asking your students to use the target language, make sure they are in situations that they can handle. Let's get into a little bit about what I do versus what the students are expected to do. Again, I'm going to strive for 100% target language use. I'm going to speak Spanish all the time. That's our culture. My students are not required. they're not penalized for using English most times. My AP students are. AP, they're required to use Spanish all the time, but that's AP. My other students are not most of the time. I talk to them in Spanish. I don't really give them a lot of opportunity to speak English. They'll do a lot of listening early on. They may give me simple things early on. Then they will use more and more Spanish. Their intimidation is important. We don't want students to be intimidated. Some students are ready and brave, and they want to just try everything in the target language, and they make a bunch of mistakes and they don't care, and they're just reckless. And that's awesome. Some students want to be perfect. That's how I was. And so they don't speak a lot early on. That's fine. They grow and they speak at different times, and that's fine. Sorry. Naturally, they just start to do it more and more, whether I require it or not. There are times when I require students to speak only Spanish, but I prepare them well. This is really something that builds confidence. I think it's best to have something that signifies no English time in class. And for me, it's a light. I have this little closet light. When it's off, I'm going to speak Spanish all the time. Students are expected to speak Spanish as much as they can. Most of them do. It's a Spanish world. But if they speak English, nobody gets penalized. It's fine. When the light gets turned on, it's a different world. Now, if you speak English, you will get penalized. You lose points. It might be we're going to talk for 5 minutes. This 5 minutes of talking is a 5-point assignment. If you don't speak any English, you get 5 points. Boom. If you do, you lose a point when that light is on. What's important is I'm not just turning that light on all the time. I'm turning that light on when they are in a situation they can handle, when they are very well prepared, and I've structured the questions that they're answering, or I've structured the conversation that we're having, and they can handle it. And as much as they complain early on and get scared about it, it builds confidence, because this light, I'm putting them in manageable situations. Intimidation is a factor. The other factor is laziness. Sometimes students are not intimidated. They're just speaking English because they're not trying to speak Spanish, and that's different. And so when I'm putting them in manageable situations and turning this light on, that's what I'm getting rid of. And I'm forcing them for 5, 10, 15 minutes to only use the target language. And basically what it does is it eliminates all the things that they don't need to say and makes them focus on speaking Spanish, and it goes really well. As my students go up later into level 3, into level 4, I rarely use this because it becomes part of the culture, and I don't need to penalize because students are just going to speak Spanish. Because the other thing that's important, they want to hear us speaking our target language, and they want to speak their target language. They want to get to where they can do it. So they may complain a little early, but eventually they see that it's building skills, they grow their confidence, and then they don't even need it. Okay. The last thing we want to get into tonight, and I'll come back. We can have some questions at the end. I know there may be some questions about this. I know some teachers use other symbols, like they have a flag that they put up or something that they hold or whatever that requires students to use the target language. But again, if you have questions on that at the end, we can come back to that. The last thing I want to give you are some activities to boost target language use. Some things, again, you could do this tomorrow. Some of you are probably on spring break. You could do it Monday. Some of you are like me, you'll be on spring break next week. So maybe it's the Monday after, whatever. You could use this right away if you want to just use the target language a lot. The first one is warm up routine and questions. And this is something that we do every day. I know a lot of teachers do this every day. This starts to establish that culture of using the target language. It gets us into the Spanish mode every day. Start with this every day. How are you doing and why? And students like this not only because it's good, it's high frequency things to talk about. It gets them used to using language. They also like to talk about how they're feeling. Sometimes I'll just let them say, bien o mal, I'm good, I'm bad, boom. Sometimes I'll say, all right, no, you got to give me a different adjective. You have to say I'm tired, or I'm excited, or I'm full of energy, or I'm frustrated, and why. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do this weekend? We use these questions all the time, and we use them in the target language. This is a time where you could put that light on or whatever and not allow them to speak English. I usually don't, because again, our culture is just that Spanish happens there, and I don't really need that light. I also use this randomizer, which is basically a lot of the different questions we do. randomized, and it turns into a game. And I'm going to show this to you. It's a little, it may hurt your head a little, but let me show this to you. This is something you could do at the beginning of class. This is something you can do at any point, the end of class or whatever. Basically, when I open this randomizer, it's going to randomize questions as well as you can see in there, candy. So students are going to play this game and they're going to tell me stop. Ha, there you go. And if they say stop and it lands on candy, they win candy. And next student says, all right, I want to play. They say stop. And their question is, what is the best part of today? Next student says, all right, I want to play. We started running. Goes through all these questions. They say stop. Oh, another one wins candy. So there are different questions throughout here. What do you have to do today, but you don't want to do? What's the worst part? You can make, and I have a video here to show you how to make this. You can make you can make a bunch of questions that fit with your unit. So let's say we're just talking about likes and dislikes. So it could be like, do you like James Bond movies? Do you like pizza? Do you like hot dogs? And everybody answers a different question. And if they land on the candy, they get candy. You don't have to put candy in there, but it's a fun way to randomize questions. And actually you can randomize anything. I sometimes put pictures of students in there for things. So there is a video here. And if we have time later, maybe I'll go back and play a little bit of this, but the video that's embedded here shows you how to make this randomizer, make these randomizer slides and use it in class. But that's just a fun way to get a lot of questions in to really stick in that target language. Hello. Oh, that's me. Okay. Another activity is music. And music is an enormous topic. We could spend a long time talking about music, but for now, I'm just going to say that we listen to a song every week, almost every week. At the beginning of class, 5 minutes, we listen to the song. We do a lot of close activities, sometimes translation activities, sometimes correct the errors. We do all kinds of different activities with it. Music is the target language in somebody else's voice. When you have the text printed out, that's a good thing to read together. There's lots of target language used in that. And it's another thing, just like those introductory questions, that gets us established into using the language for the day. It's a great way to start your class with music. And again, there are lots of resources for that. I know a lot of teachers use music. It's also culture. It's a great way to see culture. It's also a great way to see natural use of language, because when we speak comprehensibly, sometimes it can be a little unnatural because we're trying to speak as comprehensively as possible. Music is poetic and it's natural. So that's good to see. Jokes. I tell a joke in class every day. It's another good way to provide input. It's another way to establish target language use. It's another way to stay in the target language. I do it every day in Spanish 3 and 4 and 5, which is a lot of jokes. In this presentation is this link. If you are a Spanish teacher, this is a special gift for you. If you're not a Spanish teacher, sorry, but I'm sure you can find your own jokes. This is something that I used to sell on Teachers Pay Teachers, a list of 300 jokes in Spanish. I took it down off there a while ago because there were it just wasn't a good production. It needed cleaned up. So there were a lot of errors. There were some jokes that were just dumb, I didn't like, and so on. And so I am reproducing it and going to re-release it again soon. But before I do, you are welcome to have this PDF. It has instructions for using jokes in class. Some of the things I do, telling a joke every day, making it comprehensible, making sure that we tell school appropriate jokes, making sure it's comprehensible. Some different ways to do it. And then there are here 300 jokes in Spanish. Some of them, most of them are pretty dumb. Some of them are good. Here's the thing about jokes in class. Do not take this document and give it to your students as something for them to read individually. That's not how jokes work. That's not how they work best. You have to breathe life into the jokes. You have to provide the input, the target language use with jokes. So almost always jokes include images, gestures, telling, like sometimes it turns into almost like a story where we name the people that are used in the jokes. So you have to breathe some life into them and tell the joke in your target language. But that's another way I use target language. Trivia I do trivia once a week. And I've talked about this in a few different places before, if you may have seen. But with trivia, what I do is it's usually every Tuesday. I have 6 different classes. I present them a trivia question. They all answer it. Whoever gets it right or closest to correct gets a point. At the end of the year, the team with the most points gets pizza or ice cream or cookies or whatever they want. They get really competitive about trying to win trivia. For me, it's just another way to provide the target language or to provide input and to stay in the target language. Again, this will be especially valuable for Spanish teachers, but I think if you teach another language, you can get the idea. Let me show you some of the most recent ones we've done. We did this. I found this article about the war in Ukraine. And the other great thing about trivia is it's culture. It connects us to culture. And this article on BBC Mundo, I think, about Latin American countries and who has the most powerful military and so on. And so the question, we talked about these different militaries. The question was, how many active military service people are there in this country? And that country is Costa Rica. And the answer is 0. They don't have active military. So every class, these are my different classes. They answer the question. Whoever gets it right gets a point. We did a question about this guy who is an architect from Mexico. And the question was, what building did he design? And this was a few days before the Super Bowl. I gave him some information to help him out. Most classes got it that he designed SoFi Stadium, which is used for the Super Bowl. Afterwards, we watched this video about him and talked a little bit more
Caminando entre la afición, el arquitecto Jesús Alfredo Ortiz de 50.
So that's the culture that goes into it as well as language. We talked about Encanto and which songs were most popular in the Hot 100. Again, students get into it to try to win points. Here's where our points were. This actually has been updated. Some of these classes have more points now, but they try to win for their class. For me, it's just another way to speak Spanish and get that in for them. So those things, trivia, jokes, music, these questions at the beginning, those are a big part of the beginning of every class. So often I get this question, does that leave much time for class? And one of those shifts we have to make is that this is class. Trivia and jokes and questions and music, those are all going back to that number one goal of speaking the target language and providing input. And all those things are important. We need to understand that, and we need to get students to understand that this isn't time to go to the bathroom or zone out or look at your phone or whatever. All those things that we're doing where we're just talking and it feels informal or feels like a game or whatever, that's important. That's you getting input in the language. Here's another activity, a couple variations on an activity that is really, really good for getting some target language use in, also very fun. One variation is called true or false, one is called how many, and one is called who. For the true or false activity, and this is in English for an example, but we do it in Spanish, you do it in your target language, and it can really be anything. You simply project or print a list of statements. I usually do it with students from class because personalized things are more engaging. It can be very simple. It can be very complex. Here's an example in English. Rose has read every Harry Potter book. Blanche has been in love. Dorothy has seen a play on Broadway. Sophia has broken a bone, and so on and so on and so on, as many as you want. It can be focused again on something, like you can see like the present perfect focus here. It could be random, whatever. Students take a few minutes. They take a little scrap piece of paper and they write true or false. Number 1, true. Number 2, false. Number 3, false. 3, 4, true, whatever. And then the value is when you go over it. And a lot of times I'll turn that light on for this and I will say, all right, class, Rose has read every Harry Potter book. True or false? The class will say true or false, whatever I think. And I'll say, Rose, have you read every Harry Potter book? And she'll say no. And I'll say, oh, it's false. And so they'll mark, did they get that right or not? And then I can say, who has read every Harry Potter book? And students can raise their hand. And I can say, have I read every Harry Potter book? And they'll say no or yes. And I can say, yes, I have. I haven't. I haven't read every Harry Potter book. There's so much potential for language and speaking and communication. If you're a little more advanced, then you can say, oh, which book is the best? Which is the worst? Are the movies better than the books? So much potential for talking about one thing. Then we move on to number 2. Blanche has been in love. Blanche, have you been in love? Yes, that one's true. Yay. At the end of that, which can take 10 minutes, it could take 40 minutes. It's engaging because we're talking about our friends and we're using the language and we're trying to win the game. Whoever has the most right can get candy or whatever. Now, again, this is a great thing to use tomorrow. Like if you want to just do this activity because you want to speak your language for 15 minutes, this is a great activity. Similar, this one doesn't use names. The question is cuántos, how many? And I put a kind of a simpler example here in English. How many people have cats, prefer dogs, can drive, have a car, cannot swim, etc. Now students make that list on their scrap paper and they write a number. 6, 4, 3, 8. And then now I'll say, all right, how many people have cats? And all we have to do is raise our hands. I count 8. All right, 8 people, whoever got the closest to 8 or has 8 gets a point. Again, a lot of potential for talking and communicating. We can go in as deep or as shallow as we want with these questions with this how many. A variation, similar. I do these a lot on Monday. We come in Monday and I just feel like we need to do a little something to get us back into Spanish and to kind of ease us into the week before we get into things that are heavier. It also is a good time to talk about the weekend, especially like this true or false. Like Rose went to the basketball game. Blanche broke the law or whatever. And then the third variation is to simply ask the question, who? This is one we actually did in class the other day. I translated to English here, but we did it like this. And might have been over Christmas break or over spring break. Now all you have to do is write the name of somebody in class for whom this is true. Who bought gasoline? Randy. Who visited a grandparent? Jennifer. Who ate in a restaurant? Kathy, whatever. And then when you go over it, you look to see if your person did it and they get a point. That's a very quick explanation, but there's so much potential for talking the target language with these very simple. And the other thing about these activities is like, you can create it in a few minutes. I've actually done it where I didn't have the names in yet in time for the true and false one. And you can do it in 2 minutes as they're coming into the classroom and have it ready to go. Very little prep time for something that has potential for a lot of language use in class. And I love those kind of activities where low prep time equals lots of class time. And then the other one is student questions. Students talk in pairs or groups. This is not an input when they're talking and I project questions and they talk together. It's not input when they talk to each other. It's practice. That's fine. I usually turn that light on. I give them questions that I know they can answer. It builds their confidence as they do it. And then we go over those questions and that's the input. I do this a lot. I do this a lot of just projecting questions and having students talk together. It again goes back to the fact that for me, target language use is goal number 1. So for me to spend 15 minutes of students talking together and then us going over those questions, that fits within my goal. Compelling questions work best. Not boring questions, compelling questions. And you know what's most compelling for your students. I think this is the final one of these is a game. Again, super simple and super valuable for getting target language use into your students. You can actually take this presentation and use it tomorrow and play a very fun game where you get to speak the target language a lot. You could also create your own. I call it hot seat or silla caliente. I have like a dozen of these different presentations created. And the idea is it's really a practice of circumlocution. It's that idea of, can you talk around a word or phrase that you don't know how to say in the target language? And so I project 5 words on the screen. What I usually do is I put 2 students in chairs facing me. My students, by the way, sit in a semicircle. So this all fits in there. The students do not look at the screen. They look at me. They're teams, boys against girls or one half the room against the other. Or maybe it's just individuals against each other. And I project these 5 words and then I talk in Spanish. I describe what they are. And the students, all they have to do is say the English word. And the first one to get it right gets a point. So if I'm doing Spanish, I might say, es un disco que se tira en la playa. It's a disc that you throw at the beach. And I may say first, es un gato grande y negro. It's a big black cat. This is when you die in the water. This is electricity that you see in the sky. This is how you feel before a test or whatever. It's a great game because it's target language. It's listening skills. It's improving really comprehending what you hear. 2 students or 1 student or 3 students play at a time, but everybody else is paying attention. Everybody is getting that input. They're mentally seeing it and answering it. Now that's very easy for them because they see it, but they're still getting the input. They're engaged because it's funny and it's fun. And as the teacher, this is a great way for informal assessment of where my students are in their processing. When we play this game early on in the year, it takes them a long time. Like I have to speak really slow. I have to repeat, sometimes use my hands. It takes them a long time to get it. As the year goes, they get better and better. And we get to this point of the year and it's boom, 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 boom. And I just see, and they see too, they start to realize how much better they're processing. We do this a lot if we have 10, 15 minutes left at the end of the day, from time to time. And I just have these list of words. The idea again is there should be words that students don't know in the target language because we're practicing, what's it called? We're practicing circumlocution. You can do it where the students talk to each other or they talk to the person playing. That's not input and students will cheat. I know how to do it where I don't use my hands, I don't use proper nouns, and I don't use English. When students do it with each other, they'll be like, como se dice beach? And you're like, and they say, you just said that English word that you're breaking the game. Some of the upper level students can do it, and it's a fun thing to start to do as students get used to it, but it works best if you do it and provide the input for your students. So again, very simple, doesn't take a lot of prep, very useful in class. Great thing to do tomorrow if you want to use the target language a lot. Reading, we're going to get into reading next time. Reading is the target language in somebody else's voice. Great way to provide natural language for students. It also provides opportunities for speaking, and we'll get into that in April. Okay, the last thing I want to do, and I'll do it kind of quickly here. I teach Spanish 3 and 4 and 5, and what I hear a lot of times is, okay, it's easy to use the target language in the upper levels. It's not possible in the lower levels. And I don't agree. It is more difficult. You have to simplify more. Your percentage, it may not be 90, it might be 80, it might be 70. Again, don't worry about the percentage. Worry about trying to do as much as possible. But it is possible. You can do a lot with a little if you're really focused on high frequency and simplifying. I have recently done, well, in the last couple of years, some beginner Spanish courses with people from the community, with people at church, and people who knew no Spanish. And we're doing it like for an hour a week, brand new to it. And we spoke Spanish the whole time. Here's what I do. Here's what I would do if you're low level and you want to start out using the target language. First of all, hang your question words. When, where, why, how. You're going to use those a lot. You're going to point to those, quién, cómo, dónde, so on. Start doing a lot every day. How are you? Just, cansado, or triste, sad, or bien, or mal. Start getting them used to those adjectives and how are you doing every day. Those action verbs, eats, runs, sleeps, walks, fights, hits. We spend in my classes a week, and some of those other ones, hours, a couple hours internalizing those gestures, repetition, stories, whatever, a lot of gestures. Gestures really help with those. Get those words internalized because again, you can do a lot with that. I discourage some students and a lot of grownups want to write down at this point. If they really, really, really want to, fine. But I want them to hear it because when you write down and you're not used to the language, you start to pronounce things wrong. I discourage writing down at that point. A lot of personalized questions. So again, if we're talking about walks and runs and eats, who eats McDonald's, who eats Burger King, who eats pizza, who walks a lot, who walks a little, who walks fast, who runs slow. Personalized questions along with those. Get those internalized. Then start with some Super 7. Has, once, there is. Who has this? Who has that? Who wants this? Who wants that? There is. These ones are not as easily gestured, so we have to get a lot of repetitions in personalized situations. When you have these internalize, and you start to get these internalized, there's so much you can do. There's what I was talking about, those personalized questions, cognates, simple words. Stories, we invent. Now, again, some people aren't comfortable with storytellers and actors, and that's fine. You could draw, you could just talk. Start to have students give you some details for stories. And this is something that we're going to get into in the 4th session here, is some of these type of things. And then read. Create similar stories to what you did in class and read. Read several times, various ways. Students read, you read, translate, read a word each person. Answer questions about the reading where English isn't allowed. We did this in these groups a few hours into it. In fact, let me show you very quickly. This is a reading I did. This group had, I put on here 3 to 4 hours. That's probably all we had together. So people that didn't know any Spanish. And I sent them this reading and they understood it. There's a man, his name is Isaac. He has a beard. We had talked a lot about beards. This was an adult group. He has a refrigerator. He has a car. He has a cat. His cat's name is Otis. Isaac doesn't have a girlfriend. Isaac wants a girlfriend. He wants a pretty girlfriend. He doesn't want a cat. He wants a girlfriend. Isaac throws his cat in the refrigerator. The cat cries. Isaac laughs. Isaac drives his car to Walmart because he wants a girlfriend. There are women at Walmart. There are a lot of pretty women at Walmart, and so on and so on and so on, including dialogue. And this builds so much confidence for students, because after a few hours, like, I can read this and understand it and start to use it. And there's just so much that you can do when you get that little bit internalized. And then also cognates help a lot at the beginning. But now, as we read this, there are some things like this. My husband kisses me a lot. This construction we hadn't seen, but we had seen the rest of it, and they understood it because of the context, and they started to see how they could understand things that they maybe haven't seen before. So that is the power of reducing and using high frequency and really using that target language. That's really the power of CI as well. Reduce the amount of information, increase repetition, and natural use. And this is something we talked about last time, was just that this really builds depth for our students when we do this, getting students to understand that we're building depth as we do that. Okay, so 7:48. We wanted to leave some time for some questions and answers here at the end. This is my website. I have a lot of Spanish books there available for sale. Again, if you want to contact me, there's a way to do that at that website. So let's go. I have not been looking at the chat because I have been chatting myself. Chuck, I don't know if you have any questions that you've seen, or if we want to just.
Most of the chats are definitely going to be down towards head towards like the middle or so of of the chats, and you'll see. I think it starts right there with Brenda. She has a question of how do you fit everything in? It's 7:31.
Okay. All right. Well, so I'll start there. How do you fit everything in? I have 80-minute classes every other day and can barely get required material covered. Okay. So yes, that's tough. And I have 40-minute classes every day. So we're pretty much in the same situation there. And a lot of this comes back to that required material. For me, that using the target language and doing all that things, that is my required material. Now, I'm in a situation where I have freedom to determine what is required. If you have other things that you have to cover, that makes it more difficult. It really does. And so I would just spend as much time as you can on these engaging target language activities, and the minimum, whatever you can get away with on those required things. The other thing is to try to take what's required and make it target language friendly, which that is the idea of adapting traditional curriculum to CI techniques, which is, again, an enormous topic, but something that there's a lot of resources on how to do that. Can you give an example of a trivia question? I wonder if this was asked before. I did show some of those examples.
I think it was before that.
Okay, good. My administration wants me to have essential questions, specific things students are learning for that period. How do we do this with this type of strategy? Okay, essential questions. That's a good point. And sometimes it's getting administrators to understand that what we do in language is build skills based on input. And so those essential questions aren't necessarily based on knowledge or information. You can focus everything you're doing, like those activities I showed you with the true and false. You can base those all about one topic that fits an essential question. You can make your opening questions about a certain topic every day. The other thing you can do is if you can get students or your administration to agree to the fact that your essential question is something very broad, like I'm increasing my ability to understand spoken language, or how do we increase our ability to understand spoken language? How do we increase our skills? How do we participate better in conversation and communication? That may not be what your administrator wants. The other thing that's really helped me is to work with administrators and get them on the same page as to how language is a little different than other subjects and how our goals can be a little different. Can I share the common actions doc? Yes, it's in this presentation. In a second here, maybe I can put it in the chat. Oh, and there's some help for Stephen on some essential questions.
And if you can't get it up in the chat right now, you can send it to me later, and I'm just going to include it in the email that's going to go out to everybody. So everybody will get those links.
Okay. Alicia here makes a good point. I find it easier to stay in the target language in level 1 compared to level 4. Sometimes that's true because you can simplify in level 1 and stay in that target language. And in level 4, if you have some expectations of some very complex things, it's harder to stay in that target language. That can be true. But so I think, yeah, good. Can I explain my point system? It's not very complicated. And it's all, I change assessment and points a lot, or points at least a lot. Pretty much I do everything as just one category of product points. And so some of those little speaking activities are going to be 5 to 10 points, which are, maybe 1 to 2% of what the grade would be for 9 weeks. Are the closet lights magnetic? Yes, they are. Yeah. And that helps them stick on the board.
Jill asked a question above that. Are you going to be at Skolt?
I don't think so.
No.
Also,
I was just wondering.
No.
I am going to be at Skolt, by the way.
Okay, good.
So I'll be there. And Vose's Digital, I know they're going to be there.
I don't know. I don't know what Skolt is. Where's that?
It's going to be in Virginia this year.
Okay.
Next week, actually. Is
it Southern states or?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I will not be there. Oh, okay. Here's a good question. And this is a very good question for CI. Can you explain why we tend to start off teaching our students in third person and how do we move to first person? The reason that we do it is, we have to simplify it. And especially when we start, the third person form of a verb and the first person form are different words. And we have to kind of see those as different words. And we don't have time to get a lot with both. We start third person, I think, because it's most common, because when we read and do like storytelling and things, that's how we see it. It tends to be the easiest to then transform into an infinitive or first person. We start to move into first person and other subjects right away. So as soon as we present something in third person, we do say, well, if I want to say I have, then I'm going to say tengo. If I want to say I want, I'm going to say quiero. We start to see those patterns. We don't get as much repetition of that. But as we go from storytelling and reading into you and I conversation, we start to see that more and more. What I do a lot of, so we're going to present it third person. We're going to read something or see a story, third person, third person, third person. Then I'm going to do those partner questions, turn that light on, put questions that they could answer. That's you and I. Do you have a cat? No, I don't have a cat. Do you have a dog? No, I don't have a dog. Do you want a dog? And so on. So it is important to do it. It's harder to get as many reps. Yeah, there's a good comment about shrinking down what needs covered. Talking with your department, talking with your administrators is very, very important. Getting them on the same page. And a lot of that comes back to getting students excited about your class. If students are excited about your class and registering for it, that goes a long way in the eyes of administrators. for them to want to know what you're doing and how. Well, okay, I teach Spanish 1, grades 9 through 12. I have students with 504s. How does CI and target language accommodate for students that aren't auditory learners? Do you include handouts for some students to follow along? Yes, you can. Absolutely. If they're not auditory learners, then reading is the key. I would provide handouts for them to follow along. And then I would also encourage them to read extra because they might be missing out on some of the input that other students are getting. Reading, you could just do reading and get so good. Get them to do some extra reading. Third person naturally use more. Someone asked about watching this recorded later. Yes, this will be available later.
Bryan, I don't know if you saw my comment. I get the situation where the kids are really just so excited that they're crazy and they don't listen. And when you're talking about the seats and the idea that some of the kids are just listening because it's interesting.
Yeah.
Can you?
Okay, so you mean
in a nutshell, in 1 minute or less, tell me how you do classroom management.
Do you mean just for that hot seat game, or do you mean?
Well, it was an example to make it a little more manageable for you to answer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, classroom management. With things like that, the game and just telling them to be quiet for the game helps because they're so engaged in the game. If students are yelling out a lot of things in English, sometimes it's, and again, this is me working with older students. Maybe I don't understand that situation as well. And some of the lower, younger, like freshmen and 8th graders, but getting them to buy in, whatever you can do for your classroom management. Some people use like rewards at the end of the week. Some people use, like punishment or type things where if students, they get tallies or whatever on the board, that's fine. You can use the light or the no English thing for activities like that. Like we're playing a game and students are getting really, really excited and they're into it. They're not doing other things. That's good. But they're just yelling out too much English because they're just kind of letting themselves go a little bit. That kind of thing, you can turn that light on and now they're going to lose points for that kind of thing. That can be effective as well. But it's a great question because it's something that with CI that you just have to work on classroom management as well and how you do that. One of the things that I found for classroom management is using compelling materials. Getting students to want to be engaged goes a long way. Doesn't fix everything, but it goes a long way. Someone asked about points for things. Yeah, that is a grade.
All right. I just posted a link to the video that's over at our Facebook page. If we didn't get a chance to get to your question, or if you happen to think up some new questions that you really wanted to ask, head on over to our Facebook page, post it as a comment there right at the video. And then Bryan, if you get a chance, stop by, check out some of the comments that have been made there, and you can reply to them and answer people's questions right there.
Okay. I can do that.
Right. The YouTube video is going to get uploaded next week. And next week is also when I'll be sending out the email that's going to have everybody's PD certificate and links to everything else that we have, including links to register for the next event, which, Bryan, that's going to be April 28th. Yep.
I know that we're just about to end here, but I just put in the chat the actions document somebody asked about, which again will be in that presentation, but that Google Doc that I just put in there is that.
Awesome. All right. Well, Bryan, thanks so much for joining us and for doing this for us. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And everybody else, thanks so much for coming out this evening. It's wonderful seeing everybody. And don't forget to head on over to our Facebook page if you have questions. Thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Chuck, for everything.
Flangoo.com